Fellas, I did a video the other day where I talked about one thing that I like about every UFC champion, but listen, the champions aren't flawless. Even though we've got some pretty cool champions right now, they're not flawless, so I'm going to be going over one thing I dislike about every current champion. I'm going to be honest, some champions were easier than others. There's some champions that have a lot more flaws than others, so yeah, we're just going to go in there with the heavyweight division. Let me know if you agree with these takes, or if, maybe I should have gone with the more obvious option. But first option in heavyweight is Jon Jones, and for Jon Jones, he's the opposite of a BMF. Don't get me wrong, right? I still think he's the greatest. I still think what he's achieved is amazing and stuff, but he's the opposite of a BMF. First of all, you can't be a BMF. You can't be bad if you take steroids to win fights. Like, imagine having the BMF belt around your waist and then also saying, oh yeah, I did take steroids at this one time. Like, if you take steroids in the UFC or in MMA, or to be honest, in any combat sports to win, you're not a BMF. Like, taking steroids is pretty low, and the fact that he's done that, obviously the opposite of a BMF. On top of that, maybe this is a smart decision for Jon Jones, but the fact that he never takes short notice fights as well. He's done it in the past, let's be honest, if Stipe Miocic would have pulled out, there's no way that Jon Jones is fighting Pavlovich and Aspinall, and we'll get on that in a minute, but the fact that he's never willing to take short notice fights. We've got people like Gilbert Burns fighting three times a year before May. We've got all these fighters that, Volkanovski taking a short notice fight against Islam on 12 days notice. And then you've got Jon Jones, who will never take a short notice fight. He says he does it because he wants to study every opponent, but if you're the greatest of all time, surely you'd be able to, I don't know, at least do well against a guy even though you haven't really studied him. I don't know, maybe it's a smart decision from him. I'm not saying, he should be taking short notice fights. I mean, he's undefeated, so obviously it's working, but also as well, going up to heavyweight and avoiding all the tough fights. He fights Cyril Gane, which I'm going to be honest, there were a lot of people saying Cyril Gane were going to win, but then he goes for Stipe Miocic. How old is he now? 42, 41 years old. Last fight was in 2021, early 2021, and he got slept. There's Pavlovich waiting for a belt. There's Aspinall. There's all these up-and-coming contenders. And I'm not saying he has to beat all these contenders. Like I said, I'm not saying it's a smart decision to do it. But we can't call Jon Jones a BMF. I saw someone say that, I think it was Adam Catterall or Nick Pete in TNT Sports. They were saying that Jon Jones is a BMF, and I'd completely disagree. I think he's the opposite, and he always gets himself in trouble as well, whether it be the steroids or what he does outside of the octagon. Jon Jones, for me, he's an amazing fighter, but he's definitely not a BMF. Complete opposite of one. Never takes short notice fights, takes steroids, avoids all the tough fights, kind of takes a bit of an easy route in the UFC. And he fought in the light heavyweight division, and I know it's not his fault, and I'm not trying to discredit him, but it wasn't the toughest division at the time, was it? The light heavyweight division. I mean, you've got divisions like lightweight and bantamweight. The light heavyweight probably isn't the most difficult era that he fought in, but yeah, Jon Jones, for me, the one thing I dislike out of a lot of things is the fact that he's the opposite of a BMF. Light heavyweight, this is really hard. The only thing I could think of for Jamal Hill was the fact that he's always getting injured. The Paul Craig fight, right? The one loss in his record is because of an injury to Paul Craig. He got in a submission. Pretty sure he broke his arm, or I don't know, he fractured his arm, and now he's just been ruptured. I don't know what he ruptured, but he's been injured now against Yuri Prohaska, so that, he's had to vacate his belt. And before everyone says Jamal Hill's not the champion, it's vacated. The only reason I'm including Jamal Hill is because he is the most recent champion we've had at light heavyweight, and I don't want to completely skip the division. So assuming that Jamal Hill's still the champion, the one thing I dislike about him is the fact that he's got some soy genetics, man. Always getting injured. I'm pretty sure he got injured playing basketball, which is why he had to vacate the belt, which is just kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you. But he's a genuine threat. That's the thing to Jamal Hill. He's a genuine threat. He's a knockout artist. He's a threat to the light heavyweight contenders. I think him versus Yuri or him versus Pereira could be some really good matchups. And he's not really got any other major flaws. He's a nice guy and stuff, but he needs to stop getting injured, man. I can't see Jamal Hill get injured every 3 years. We can't be doing that. If you want to go on a title run, you can't be getting injured this often. Listen, there's nothing else I could think of for Jamal Hill. It's just the fact that he gets injured pretty often. So, Jamal Hill, start drinking milk, mate, and stop getting injured. Next fighter, I'm going to go with Sean Strickland. The thing I don't like about Sean Strickland is the fact that he loses to a lot of the top fighters, in my opinion. He's a nice guy and stuff, but I don't see him beating a lot of the top fighters. I'm glad he's the champion and everything. I'm glad he was the guy to beat Adesanya. Sean Strickland, I'm glad he's the champion, and I'm glad that he was, of all people, the guy to beat Adesanya, but I still believe he doesn't beat a large amount of people in the top 10. I don't think he beats Dricus du Plessis. I think him versus Cannonier in a rematch, and he already lost to Cannonier, but I think him versus Cannonier in a rematch could be really close. I'm not sure if he beats Whittaker. There's other people as well, like Hamzat Chimaev up and coming. There's a lot of contenders in middleweight as well. And I just don't feel like he beats a lot of the people. Now, hopefully he proves me wrong and he goes on an absolute tear at middleweight, but I just don't see him beating a lot of these people. And I'm going to get hate for this, but he didn't necessarily deserve a title shot in the first place. He got knocked out by Alex Pereira. Then he loses to Jared Cannonier. Then he gets a win over Imavov and Abbas Magomedov. And then he gets an immediate title shot. I mean, I'm not saying he did win the belt, so obviously he should have deserved it somewhat, but I don't know how I feel about that, man. I'm not sure he necessarily deserved it. And like I said, he did lose to Cannonier, even though a lot of people thought it was a robbery. Cannonier has to get 2 more wins after beating Strickland before a title shot. He has to beat Marvin Vettori and then get another win, whereas Strickland loses to Cannonier and just, gets 2 wins after that against Imavov and Magomedov and gets a title shot. And in my opinion, I think it's the Dricus era. I think this is the Dricus du Plessis era, in my opinion. So that's the one thing I dislike about Strickland. He's a nice guy, he's an entertaining guy, but I just don't see him beating a lot of these contenders. Welterweight, Leon Edwards. It's his lack of promotability. There's only so many times we can keep going over this head kick knockout, in my opinion. There's only so many times. This head kick knockout has been the theme for his promotion for, the Usman fight, the trilogy with the Usman, and now the Covington fight. He's just not the most promotable guy. On the mic, he doesn't really... No one can understand him on the mic, by the way. I'm from the UK. I still can't understand Leon Edwards most of the time. It's not like he's a trash talker. It's not like he riles people up for his fights. So on the mic, he's not that good. And then you look at his actual fights, and I'm not saying he's a boring fighter like Belal Muhammad, but he has kind of just got a point fighting style like Adesanya. I do think he's more entertaining than Adesanya, but he's kind of got a very similar point fighting style. And there's only so much times we can use the head kick knockout for promo. Like, that's kind of all he's got going for him right now. And I like Leon Edwards. I hope he beats Covington, but the entire promo is literally just a head kick knockout that happened 14 months ago. He's not good on the mic. His style isn't necessarily extremely entertaining. So I think Leon Edwards, as good as he is, and, although he beats a lot of these contenders, in my opinion, well, maybe not Belal Muhammad, unfortunately, but even though he beats a lot of these contenders, I just still feel like his promotability isn't great. So for Leon Edwards, I think his lack of promotability is the one thing that kind of brings him down. Next fighter, Islam Makhachev. Thing I don't like about Islam is that he beats our favourite fighters. He's an amazing fighter himself, but I don't like the fact that he's always able to beat our favourite fighters. And that's because he ruined the flawless career of Volk. If Islam Makhachev doesn't exist, Volk would have a flawless UFC career. Undefeated in the UFC, smoking everybody, and the only losses on his record in the UFC are to Islam Makhachev, one by decision and then one by knockout. He ruined Volk's career, and now he's gone out there and ended the Oliveira era. How fun was it when Oliveira was champion? I'm not trying to discredit Islam here, but how fun was it when Charles Oliveira was champion, when he was smoking people like Poirier, Chandler, Gaethje, and now he's just done it to Dariush, and now he's just had to end that era by submitting Oliveira. He went out there, dominated him and submitted him, and now he's going to beat him again. I'm pretty sure they're rescheduled to fight early 2024, and he's going to end Oliveira again, and it's just unfortunate. All our favourite fighters keep losing to Islam, and now we've got Gaethje, a fan favourite, putting on banger fights every fight, and now we're going to have to see Gaethje get folded by Islam Makhachev as well. I don't mind Islam, I don't hate him or anything, but the fact that he's beating our favourite fighters, for me, listen, get out the UFC, mate, cut him from the UFC. No, I'm kidding, but still, I just don't like the fact that he's beating our favourite fighters. Come on, let's. Why can't we do Islam versus, Ian Gary, someone that we don't like? Why has it always got to be Volk and Oliveira? Why has the fan favourites got to suffer? But either way, that's what I don't like about Islam. And his opponent, Volkanovski, I don't like the fact that he needs to know when to take a break. You can't be fighting every couple of months, especially when you've just been knocked out. Volk, you've got to know when to take a break. Got to stay active. But he fought in March against Islam. Then he fights on 12 days' notice against Islam again. Was it March or February when he fought Islam, I think? I think it was February. Maybe even... Yeah, it was February. Anyway, then he fights Islam again in October on 12 days' notice. And now he's already getting back in there with an absolute killer with Ilia Topuria in February. I'm pretty sure it's scheduled. So he needs to know when to take a break. Adesanya's taking a break. And I know Volkanovski's coming towards the end of his career and he wants to get as much fights as he can in his prime. But I feel like Volkanovski's going to be one of those fighters like Tony Ferguson where he doesn't necessarily know when to retire. He's fighting only a few months after getting knocked out, and now he's fighting another threat, an undefeated 26-year-old knockout artist in Ilia Topuria. And I also feel like he's too reliant on fighting. The post-fight press conference he had at UFC 294, he made it clear that he kind of struggles in life when he's not fighting, and that's kind of a problem. But he's just too reliant on it, and he needs to stop fighting every 3 to 4 months at the highest level. Don't get me wrong. Listen, him being active, he's got all these fights under his belt in his prime, so fair play to him. He's a very active fighter, but that's also going to be the downfall of him. You can't just... He needs to know when to take a break. He needs to stop doing the whole Tony Ferguson thing. I know he's only suffered one loss. He's only on a one-loss streak right now, but I'm just scared that he's going to go on this massive streak and he doesn't know when to retire. So that's what I'm going to have to say about Volkanovski. Great guy, great fighter, but he needs to take a break, and I don't want to see him back in there for a few months. Sean O'Malley. I don't like his personality. I think he just seems really insecure and terrible on the mic. He's kind of got that... He reminds me of Floyd Mayweather in the sense that he just kind of... He's a bit insecure of people critiquing him. Whenever someone critiques him or bets against him, he kind of gets mad and he kind of holds grudges against them as well. And I just feel like he's a bit insecure as a fighter. And why is this guy a massive... Like, I understand, right? He's an entertaining fighter. In the octagon, he's an entertaining fighter. But outside of the octagon, I don't know how he's so big of a star. I don't understand how he's a megastar. He's not good on the mic. He lost to Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan. Peter Yan doesn't even speak English properly. And he lost to both of them at the press conference. And I feel like he's only a megastar because of his hair. Like, I genuinely feel like O'Malley's only a megastar because he's got coloured hair. If he had, you know, brunette hair, whatever it was before, would he even be this big of a star? Like, genuinely, he's not good on the mic. He's a good fighter, but he's not good on the mic. And I don't know, I just see he's just a bit annoying. I don't really like him that much, I'm going to be honest. As a fighter, I think he's one of the best fighters in the Bantamweight division. He's proved everyone wrong by beating Yan and Sterling, but I just feel like he's an insecure champion, not good on the mic. And yeah, I mean, it would be satisfying to see Sean O'Malley get beaten, let's be honest. It would be satisfying to see Chito Vera go in there and head kick, knock him out. But either way, that's what I don't like about O'Malley. And finally, Pantoja. Again, this was a hard one, but it's kind of like Leon Edwards. He's a great fighter, but he needs to promote himself more. Pantoja is probably the most forgotten champion in the UFC right now. Out of all the champions we've got, I don't really see anyone talking about Pantoja that often. And it's a shame because he's honestly one of the best fighters in the UFC right now, pound for pound in my opinion. He absolutely put on a scrap with Moreno. He's one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC. He's never in a boring fight, always in a scrap. Always fun to watch as well, but he's still the most ignored champ. No one's really talking about him. He's got a title fight coming up on UFC 296, and I've not heard anyone talk about that fight yet. I feel like he needs to turn heel like Davison Figueiredo did against Moreno. If Pantoja turned heel, I feel like he'd get a lot more people, like he'd get a lot more eyes on his fights, he'd get a lot more people talking about him and stuff. And although he's talented, nobody wants to hear about your sob stories after the fight. We want to hear call-outs. We want to hear Pantoja on smoke. Imagine he just starts trash-talking Moreno, trash-talking Manel Cap, all these other contenders in the flyweight division. And that's what I don't like about Pantoja. For the entertainment that he brings, like, I think it's also the fault of the flyweight division. It probably just isn't one of the best divisions in the UFC, but I think he needs to promote himself more. But for me, though, that's one thing I dislike about every UFC champion. Let me know what you dislike about every champion and if you agree. Yeah, thanks for watching.